Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Sandra Hartstone Show. I'm really honored that you have decided to spend a few minutes with us today. I also hope you're checking out heartstonenetwork.com. This is a place where we are aggregating lots of content that we hope will inspire you, teach you, motivate you, encourage you. There's all kinds of content, teaching, testimonials, you name it. Well, let's talk about propaganda. We all know that propaganda in the United States is causing all kinds of crazy harm. It's manipulating people. It's lying. It's like there's a dark agenda that's trying to change America to be whatever they want America to be. And we're going to give an example of the harm of propaganda. Today, Henriette is going to talk in depth about her experience in the Rwandan genocide. She lost her entire family, and it was all because of propaganda. You're going to hear her story when we come back. Welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us today. As I promised, we're going to dive into our special story today. Let me bring on my friend, Henriette Mutagwaraba. Henriette, thanks so much for coming on today and being willing to share your very, difficult story. How are you today?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for asking.
Well, that's awesome. Henriette, let's just get right into it. I have told everyone you survived the Rwanda genocide. It's actually the Rwanda genocide of the Tutsi tribe. Let's start with the day. Tensions and stuff had built up. I think, by now in history, we know there was, a genocide. But I really would like to get your personal story, like what happened to you. Like you woke up one morning and you heard something on the radio. What did you hear on the radio on that fateful morning?
Well, the oppression began years since before 90s and 50s. That's when the government started oppressing the Tutsi tribe. But then, that's a long story. In the 90s, they increased the propaganda, and they have this anti-Tutsi propaganda, and they even come up with the 10 Commandments, Hutu 10 Commandments, which will describing Tutsi tribe as the enemy of the country or enemy of Hutu people. And the young people really were encouraged. They incited hatred against Tutsis, and the government had roadblocks everywhere in the country to prevent Tutsis to escape. And that time from 90s, we as the Tutsis were not allowed to leave the country because the government was planning what they called apocalypse. That was the end of the Tutsis human being in our country, that everybody was going to be killed.
Because I read that the goal was to kill 1,000 Tutsis every hour.
Every hour, yes.
Wow.
And they made the list. They made the list of every Tutsis in the neighborhood and everywhere. So they knew where we lived. They knew our everyday activities. And then April the 7th, the genocide began all over the country. There was a radio called LTLM, that's a French, that was encouraging, inciting people, telling them, you need to grab your weapons and search them in their homes and kill them all. And we're telling them that if we kill all of them, we're going to take what they had. We're going to take their lands, we're going to keep their animals, we're going to take their wives, and we're going to, there was so much inciting. But the propaganda prior to this genocide was really, really intense. I remember every Saturday in the neighborhood, they would have these meetings with the radio and the music. This music was nothing, the music was pretty much in our language, but singing about hate and how many they're going to kill and how they're going to kill us. And
now, let me, Henriette, just give everybody a visual on this. You weren't like living in one part of town and the other tribe somewhere else. You guys were like neighbors. These were neighbors and people you worked with and played with and even married, right?
Yes, there were neighbors, but also remember on the top of that, there was the government. The government was the one who was controlling and planning these events, this propaganda. Every Saturday they have these huge meetings with the radio. The leaders in a villages that we join and incite and tell them, singing the music that was just of hatred and dehumanizing Tutsi tribe that we call as snakes, cockroaches. And in their speeches, they will say that in a 59, when it was the first killing happened, they will say that in a 59, we did not kill all of them. This time around, this is our opportunity. We're going to make sure that everybody is killed. Because they were talking about the people, the Tutsis in diasporas, that we made the mistake, we should have killed all of them in 59. And in 59, that's when my grandpa was killed. My father grew up without a father because I lost my grandpa. I wasn't there, but my father and my mother, they both experienced the killing in 59. So then in 1994, the killing began. They used machetes, the roadblocks everywhere. They killed the people with a knife. People paid money to be protected. Some of them, they would say, "Don't kill me with a knife. I give you the money so you can shoot me." So there was, people died in a torturous way that a human being have ever faced in this world.
Because this is like with machetes and stuff, right? It's not like with guns. It's
knife,
machetes.
Crabs, spears, and for so many years, with this oppression, the propaganda, Tutsi tribe had no voice. Our voice was taken away. And we learned how to cope with oppression. And that's what happened when there is so much propaganda and oppression. When your voice is taken away, you get to the point where to learn how to cope with your pain and your oppression so that you can survive, so that you can see the next day. So 1 million of people were killed in less than 100 days. And then after we got a new government, and now another journey began, because we had to give a proper burial to our family members. During that time, I lost my mother, my siblings, pretty much everybody in my family. I have one sister who survived. And
because you were like at school, right? You were at school.
No, I had left the Rwanda. So what happened before the 7th, the killing started all over the country, I was able to leave the country and go to a neighboring country. So when I came back,
you escaped for fear of your life, right?
When I came back, my whole family was gone, and I had one sister who survived. And since I was older in my family, a lot of people were gone anyway, but I had to be responsible to make sure that my family, my father, my siblings and aunties and cousins were given a proper burial. And that's when we started to exhume their bodies and buried them at the memorial sites.
Well, now tell me about that morning that you woke up, and what did you hear on the radio?
So the radio, over the radio, the beginning that's right away when they started to kill, they were telling people, get up, grab your machetes, grab your knife, go find every Tutsi enemy cockroaches where they are hidden. We're going to kill them. Today is the day. And they're going to say that, they're going to tell those militias that you're going to be rewarded after you kill those enemies.
And you couldn't call your family and warn them?
No, I couldn't that time because, before, when genocide began, there was no funds anywhere, but also there was no way there's no way you can be in a church with somebody in a place where there is a war, or people are hiding and all over the place, and who's gonna
I can't imagine. So you're sitting in another place, and you've heard that they're coming after everyone to kill them, and you're just sitting there. I mean, like with no new information. I mean, what was that day like?
It was I would say that it was a terrible day of my life, because you feel your heart place, and you feel that you kind of in a denial. Is this really happening to me? Is really this happening to another human being? Is really, you kind of wish it was a dream, and that the next morning when you wake up, is going to be just like a nightmare. It's going to be like any other day. Say, oh, I had a bad dream. That was a terrible dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was happening, and it was happening to my family.
So how long after those 100 days, I mean, did you know anything about your family for 100 days, or were you left in the dark for those 100 days?
Those 100 days, I didn't know anything about my family. But the time I was living not far from the border of Rwanda, and I've seen a lot of refugees, people were escaping the killings and coming, and really wounded people. And I remember there was an hospital by the border where the Red Cross and other humanitarian cars will go and pick up the refugees and take them to the hospital. Most of them were missing arms, air, eyes, breathing. And I remember one time I get up, I say, I need to go search among those people. And maybe somebody from my family can be among these refugees. And I took days, I went to hospitals and I helped a little bit. And the hospital was overwhelmed with a lot of wounded people. People would die in a tent outside. And I searched and I didn't see anybody from my family. And I had my father's cousin who lived in a city. And he sent me a letter. I was in a village at that time in Burundi. And he sent me a letter saying that, I'm so sorry, but everybody's gone. And that time, I didn't even know that my sister had survived.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, Henriette, when did you go back to your village?
Right away after the beginning of 90, the genocide ended in July. So right away in the beginning of 94, January, I had to go back. But it was at this time that in my mind, I didn't want to go. There was nothing to go back for. And I told myself that I'm going to be a refugee forever. I'm going to stay in this country. My whole family is gone. So why should I go back to Rwanda? And for some reason, God is so good. And for some reason, my sister had survived. And for some reason, somebody who knew that I was still alive told my sister that I was in Burundi. And my sister sent me a letter. And the letter was saying that everybody was killed, but I survived. So when I saw the letter, I was like, wow, I couldn't believe that my little sister survived. She was 13 years that time. And I told myself, this is the reason I can't go back to Rwanda. And I packed my things, a little bit that I had, I went back to Rwanda to meet with her. And that time she was living with my aunt who was married to a Hutu man, and that's how my auntie survived.
Oh my gosh. So how does a person recover from that? How did you move on? How did you function? I mean, that's just too much trauma.
It is by the grace of God. I would say that I lived in those dark moments, the aftermath of genocide, from losing all the homes we had. My parents had the 2 homes, and we had a lot of animals, like really country beautiful. We had a lot. We had enough. I wouldn't say a lot, but we had enough. And then you get from losing people. And I always tell people that it took me years to remember that my family used to have a house or cows or any other animals, because my whole mind was focusing to the human being that I lost. Things didn't mean anything. It took me years to, by the way, we used to have a home. By the way, we used to have a days. Because my whole time, it was just to see that I have lost everybody in my family, that I will never see them again. But as a believer, I know that I will see them again in heaven. And when I gave my life to Jesus Christ, He changed me, and He changed me forever. He brought back the joy. He gave me a family, brothers and sisters in a church who were very supportive, very loving. And I want to say that it's overnight thing. You get up in the morning and then, yeah, I'm okay. My whole family is killed, but I'm fine. And it's a process. But I wanted to say that it's through Jesus Christ, everything is possible. And that's what the Bible tells us.
Well, now you went back to your village and you wound up, the government put in a memorial, and you wound up working at the memorial and helping other people process their grief. But then how many years did you spend? I mean, this is really horrible, but you spent a long time helping dig up unmarked graves and just finding bodies everywhere, didn't you?
Yes, and I would say that there is so much healing in serving others.
Healing, so much healing.
So much healing in serving others. And I think that the time that I spent helping other survivors, and including my family, exhuming their remains, the time that I spent at the Kigali Genocide Memorial Center, helping other survivors and counseling and hugging them and being able to cry with them and let them cry on my shoulder, it did help me a lot to understand what a pain is and how one can be healed from this pain to become a normal person. And I made a decision that I don't want to be stuck in this. I made a decision to not be stuck in a pain and focus on Jesus Christ and be happy again and serve those who are hurting, because there are so many who are still hurting, so many who are still going through that post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and all of that in my country. And I love those people. It's my passion. I just wanted to be there for them.
Yes. I just want to say, if you wonder, there's a lot of really great details in this. We, of course, don't have time to cover these details, but Henriette has written this book called By Any Means Necessary. You can get this on our website at heartstonenetwork.com. You go to the store and you can get a copy of her book, and I'll even get her to autograph it for you. But listen, we have a few minutes left before the break. Now, after the break, I want to talk about the ways that you see, the things you see happening in America that remind you of what was going on in Rwanda to lead up to the genocide. But let me bring on Darla Ryden. Darla is with the Texas Apostolic Prayer Network, and Lindy Ann Hopley, excuse me, is a preacher, a pastor, evangelist, and from South Africa. And you have been to Rwanda. I understand, Lindy, haven't you? You've been to Rwanda and seen some of this aftermath. Lindy,
yeah, I had the awesome privilege of going to Rwanda with missions groups. And it was so funny because I actually, on the way back, I had missed my flight. And so I had to get off in Rwanda. They put me on one of those motorbikes, and off I was to my friends who actually had a ministry for those girls who as children lost their parents and then were forced to go into prostitution. I mean, I heard stories of people that would give their bodies for a piece of bread, for a Coca-Cola, because they were so broke, they had no one to look after them, and so they went into prostitution. And so I just said to her, can we go out? Can we go out into the village? Let's go minister to some of the ladies. And it was so powerful because God said to me, talk to this prostitute about baptism. And it was the wildest adventure. I sometimes feel like I can write a book on just 24 hours in Rwanda. Before I knew it, this lady said, yes, I need to give my life to Jesus. And yes, I want to be baptized. And as we started walking her back to the house, I would just say, ladies, it's time to get baptized. It's time to come out of Egypt. It's time to walk into the promised land. And people would just start jumping in. And before I knew it, and as you can see, Henriette, just gorgeous, tall, skinny black ladies following us, and all we had is this tiny bath at the house, and literally as their heads were going in, their legs were popping out, and and it just was so powerful. And then after we baptized them, there's this whole group of women that are now out of prostitution that come for a Bible study, and I got to literally minister to them while the motorbike is back to pick me up for the airport, because I'm 24 hours later, I'm catching the same flight back to South Africa. Wow. And I got to see, just how God, as Henriette said, God can redeem anything. He can make what was broken. He gives us beauty for ashes. What's ashes? Something that's already been offered on another altar.
Yes, because a lot of the young ladies that did survive, they were, raped and tortured and all kind of things. Darla, do you have something you want to ask Henriette?
Yes, I was taking a few notes, Henriette, and I just think it's incredible how you were talking about having no voice, but learning how to cope with your pain while you are having to learn how to just live another day. And then I also think, we all have trauma. I mean, Lindy Ann's trauma is different. Mine's different. I don't think any of mine compares. But I don't know that just like there's not level of sin, it's not a comparison. It's what we have to walk through. But the fact that you made the statement of, first, that you found healing by helping others. Because so many times when we have trauma, it's so hard to give because we're hurting so deeply. And then how you said, I just chose to be happy. All right, I'm choosing to move forward. And I think those two things, and also where we are right now as a culture, I feel like we're losing younger children because they don't feel like they have a voice, and they're just coping to try to make it through the next day. The suicide rate's up, and so I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of those.
It's not something that happened overnight, and you just need to be aware that when it comes to trauma and they call it invisible wounds because nobody can see it. Only you can feel it. Only you can know what it is, and you feel it and you live with it. When it comes to, invisible wounds, it's so hard for people to share, to expose, because everybody wanted to be strong or called strong. So I always tell people, don't be strong. Nobody's strong. Share your pain with somebody that you trust, at least somebody that is close to you. I'm pretty sure everybody has a friend. Is it somebody, even if it's not your family member, just somebody around you who wanted to listen and to hear you and to hear your pain. It's very important that when it comes to invisible wounds that you share with somebody. But also, if you need a professional help, it's okay to go seek for a therapist and talk to them of what you went through, because what is happening, especially with the men in my culture, and it's men everywhere, men are men. Okay, nobody's not. They're listening. They tend to not be open to their invisible wounds. They wanted to be men. They wanted to be strong. And the trauma is real. PTSD is real. Depression is real. It's very important that people understand that it's share with somebody, seek for help.
Right.
Now, praying is really good. You have, like in my case, when I joined the church, I joined the good church. It was a very small church where everybody knew everybody. They knew where he lives. They welcomed me, and I was hanging out with them. But also, I learned how to pray. I learned how to take my pain to God, and that helps a lot in many ways.
Hold that thought, Henriette. We have got to take a break. I just want to remind people, by any means necessary, Henriette's book, we've got to take a commercial break, and we're going to be right back. Well, we are back. We are focusing on Henriette's story today. Henriette, you were talking about prayer and how prayer got you through this horrible thing you've had to live through, and I'm going to let you finish that thought.
Well, I remember when I was in those days where I was in these dark moments of my life, and I lived with my aunt, and there was one moment where I couldn't even go out and socialize with the people who came to visit us. I just wanted to be in my room, and I couldn't even look in people's face. I didn't see any value, too much pain, and then and I began to pray. And there was a moment I tell people that Jesus found me. I wasn't looking for God. I wasn't looking for Jesus. I knew about Christianity. I was born and raised Catholic. But he found me in a place, in a dark moment of my life where I was angry to God. If he was there and if he was loving, why did he let my whole family being killed? If he was loving and if he was there, how about my little sister who was only 3 years? But he found me in my heart. One day I felt that the only way that I felt that it was this thing that I needed to speak to somebody, and it wasn't going to be a human being. I was going to be in front of God and cry it out and tell him what I felt at that moment. And that's what happened. when I learned when I started give my life to Jesus, and I knew that I can go and cry out to him, that's how I receiving my healings. I used to have a pastor of mine who used to text me and say, do you still praying with a lot of tears? Well, there was a moment where I was praying with a lot of tears because I was hurt. And there was a moment when I was praying with a lot of tears because I was rejoicing to what God have done in my life.
Yeah. Well, I just can't imagine all that you've been through. Harriet, what do you see? We've had talks where you tell me you see things in the United States as far as oppression and propaganda. You see stuff building up just exactly like it did in Rwanda that led to these horrible things. Tell us, as somebody coming to America, you weren't born and bred here. What do you see that's troubling you?
I love this country. This is my adopted country. I love this country so much, and I love to want America because what happened to my country in 1994 can happen anywhere. It's just a matter of how people plan this, and nobody's immune to what happened to my country or other mass atrocities that are happening in the world right now. There is so much propaganda that I see in this country. Maybe I say this because I have lived it. I've seen it in my country and what it does to our country, to our nation. I can tell that I see the divisions. I came here 14 years ago, and I feel it, and I see it. And sometimes I feel that I can just scream and say, wake up, guys, something is happening here. And it's not noble, it's not benign what is happening. You see young people, when everybody who does propaganda, they're always behind the young people because the young people, they're so easy to be corrupted. Their mind is so easy to be corrupted. So my message to this country that I love so much is just be careful of what you intake when it comes to propaganda and media. Save your country, save your family, and be really careful. And make sure that it's very important that we start having this tough conversation and being open of what we see. We see divisions in our families. In a lot of American families, I have families that do not talk to each other anymore because of their political. It's tough.
Well, what is it you think? What's your advice? What do we need to do?
Well, like I would say that as a Christian, as a believer, we need to turn ourselves to the Lord and pray hard for the country, and we're doing it. And it's very important that we pray for our nations, we pray for our neighboring countries, we pray for our families. And the conversation we have in our hidden place in our tables when we are in harm, when you're home, Sandra, with Josh and Chelsea, have those conversations that build the country, that loving neighbors, and speak up when you see evil happening.
So, Darla, what's going through your head right now?
She's just giving us so much to pray about and focus in on. I think some of the things that are hitting me are exactly what she's saying. We're seeing just what I was just saying a while ago about the younger generation has a suicide rate of, 40% or something. They're changing their gender because there is so much being bombarded at them with propaganda that's saying this is real, and yet it's not real. So what I see is a lot of, I think as a nation right now, we're in a lot of trauma. We are as a nation in trauma, and I don't even think we're aware of how heavy it's weighing up on us. And, it's back to what we have spoken a few different times about. We have to not be afraid to speak. We have to start being a voice and stepping out as best that we can, to bring this forth. And this may sound a little crazy, but a week ago, I was taking my son to go look at houses, and we ended up going late to a restaurant here in town that's just a little pizzeria. And we sat down. There was just our table and another table. It's 3:30 in the afternoon, not lunchtime. Nobody's eating. The place is called Fuzzy's Pizza. All of a sudden, we hear this sound from the back like things are crashing. and like a whole tray of food has fallen on the ground. We didn't know what it was. All of a sudden, I'm looking at my son who's facing the counter going, what's going on? And he says, I said, is everything okay? And he's like, no. I turn around, there's a young man that's bringing the trash can from around the back, throws it on the ground. He knocks down the cooler that has the desserts in it. All this glass goes flying. I mean, he takes the register off the counter. He threw the phone off the counter. I mean, we're just sitting there going, what is going on with this table at the back? We hear them saying, everything's okay. We've got it under control. And you're thinking, what do you have under control? and it's nothing compared to what you're saying, but it was a moment of pinch me. Is this really happening?
Yeah, because this stuff used to not happen.
Nothing like this. And then he's beating the door down, trying to break the door, the glass door. He goes outside and walks off like he's leaving. Then he turns around, comes back, beating the floor to ceiling window. And all of a sudden I pulled a Lindy Ann on it, and I started to get up, and I was going to dress that spirit. And instead I went, maybe I should just stay seated. And I turned around and pointed. I said, in the spirit of the living God right now, I say, you spirit of mayhem, anger, frustration, leave in the name of Jesus right now. And all of a sudden the guy, not because of me, but I'm just saying, taking the authority in the spirit, he goes running off. And we find out afterwards that the other couple, or the people that were sitting behind us, they were packing. They had guns. And I mean,
Were they ex-cops or something?
One of the guy was a cop. So that doesn't happen here per se, like it does in some of the states, but Texas hasn't been that kind of state. Or, I've lived here my whole life, but this is what I'm saying is we're seeing this increase of trauma
and anger.
That people are just, they're beginning to break. And we have got to come forth with this sound that you are telling us, and sharing with us. So that's how it's hitting me. There's a generation that is desperately waiting. Go, Lindy.
If I can interject here, coming from South Africa, we had apartheid, which was the segregation of races, until 1994, which is interesting because the Rwandan genocide just started at the same time. But we saw what propaganda and media can do when you keep putting gas on a fire of trauma, unforgiveness, bitterness, and hatred. The Bible actually says that unforgiveness will lead to murder. And the crazy parallel, because in South Africa, we then had, instead of the reconciliation with man of peace, Madiba, Mandela, president, it was really a setup where we had propaganda, and the anger and the hatred within our black people grew so much that they started murdering white people. So it became a reverse racism, and no one wanted to talk about it because there's this false thing around minority groups or this or that, and which brings it back to America. Like, wrong is right and right is right. Doesn't matter what the case is. And so when I started seeing the BLM movement here, and I realized this isn't about reconciliation, this isn't even really about empowering the black people. This is really putting gas on a fire of hatred and unforgiveness that needs healing. So not like, hey, you're now entitled because something wrong happened to you. Listen, my own father was murdered by 3 black people in my home. It doesn't give me permission to now go out and take a battering ram and go after black people. We have to choose to forgive. So that's why I was out with a bullhorn, because churches wouldn't speak up. And I'm like, who's going to speak up about this? But, Harriet and we've already seen this kind of stuff and where it leads. And it's like, wakey, America. This is going to lead to destruction. Yes. This is going to lead to murder. This is going to lead to bad stuff. And if anything, they're more racist against black people in America now than ever before. And the same thing with black. This was a setup not to empower black people, but to really slander their name. And I get so angry, and as a Christian, I can't use the words that I want to use in this situation. But I went with a bullhorn and I was preaching the gospel at Black Lives Matter Plaza, saying, you know, this is the truth. They're leading you in the wrong direction to think if you just punch your pain out or steal Gucci stores and do this and that, it's going to make it better. No, it's not going to make it better. And you are robbing you're robbing honor and respect for your people group from the next generations by entering into this unforgiveness, bitterness, and entitlement that came up like never before. And then obviously that just created a lot of pain in all the races that are here, you know, like
Yes.
you're releasing a stronghold of bitterness and hatred over the whole nation.
Well, you know what I hear from both of your stories again is you're sitting here looking at we're promoting slavery, because in reality it just brings everything down, because truth brings freedom. And
Yes.
yet we continue to listen to the lies that are propagated, or murder, which separates us anymore. So we hold on to these divisions, which continues to cause us to separate, where God said, Jesus came and said, look, I love diversity, you know, and the one thing that we can't, that none of us are in control of is the color of our skin. But the one thing that we have in unity is every single one of us bleeds red. And it was his blood that made the way for us to come in. So, you know, this is heavy and it's deep and it's tragic.
Yes.
I mean,
well, there's like a movement to take away. There's a movement to take away our identity. You know, if you're an
absolutely.
American,
Yes.
you're bad. If you're white, you're bad.
Right.
And so even on social media, I've been seeing these things on social media, like this TikTok that people post, and they're like apologizing for who they are. It's absurd. Let me tell you, all of racism is absurd, because when you think another race is inferior, to me, that's calling up and saying, hey, God, I know you're perfect and all that. However, the day you created whatever group of people, you must have been having a bad day. Well, you know what? I don't have that kind of guts.
The government fears unity. That's the whole thing. When you look at what's happening, it's a tyrannical takeover, and they had to break any unity they can to make the people weaker. Because if the people actually rise up together, we are more. We're in the majority. And if you look in the Bible, there was the place where they were building the Tower of Babel, and God in heavens and the angels were like, we better go down there because they're too powerful, united the way that they are. Let's split them up. And he created the split. But then Jesus said, I come back as the cornerstone, and I will unite them again by giving them all. What did he do? He split them with different languages. When he came back, he said, now I give them tongues. I give them all the same language that they can be united again. And so
Let's be the prayer for this country. This be the prayer for this country, like just the way you said it.
Well, see, they want to get rid of Christians. They don't like Christians because, you know, if you're Christian and you know who you are, you're going to fight against this. I don't see them trying to tear down any other religious groups. Do you?
Yeah.
It's Christians.
Yes. And I think, too, is all of a sudden, and I think Lance said this not too long ago, Lance Wallnow, and I thought it was good, was he just said, what's happened with Christians now is because we are standing up for truth that we know biblically, the ones that are standing up, now all of a sudden we are against the government. They're looking at us as a political entity that has to be shut down because of what y'all just said, because they have to keep things divided. So it's this mix.
And that's why they're hollering Christian nationalists, because they're trying to get everybody to hate the Christians.
All those statements. But, you know, I agree with you. I think what the Lord is doing, and I mean, he was showing me about the separation of languages back at Babel, but now what God is doing is bringing us into one language with diversity. He's going to take all those languages, and all of us have different languages, and he's going to bring us all together to make this one sound that's going to come out and bring forth change. But it isn't easy. It isn't, it's not without hardship. And I think that was the one thing I was going to say with Henriette, both of you losing life. you see in scripture over and over, the kings battled, and there was genocide. I mean, there was taking away of life, that wasn't right. And so I think sometimes we get caught in wanting to have a loving God without a God of justice. And a God of judgment. He cannot be separated. And many times we want everything that God can give us, except we don't want him. You know what? In America, that's where we are. We want everything that God says we can have, but we don't want him. Because
and we don't want to do our part.
He's causing restriction.
And the truth sets
in our
people
minds,
free.
I don't have freedom. I don't have freedom. In reality, we don't know that we're heading for slavery. So
now, Henriette, I know you do a lot of fasting and praying, and I'm assuming you do a lot of praying over America. Has God spoken to you about America and any direction we're going or what needs to happen?
Not really. He hasn't. I think what we need to do is to pray for our nation here, and we also need to pray for our neighboring countries.
Well, Darla, how are you praying for America?
Well, I am at this point. My heart is to see the church wake up, like we're talking about, to understand the perspective of kingdom. I think for a long time I'm more of the apostolic church people, is that we focus a lot on the demonic and that focus there. And what I really feel like God is moving us to is, yes, there are principalities, there are giants, there are things that are there to destroy. But where God's saying to us is, I need you to move forth for restoration, reformation, and transformation, because that's the God that I am. I can take something that's horrible and I can shift it. He had a people that disobeyed him. They ended up losing their nation, Israel. They were genocide, trying to get rid of them completely. And in one day, he turned that nation around and gave them back the land. So we can be overcomers and we can be conquerors, but I think our mode of operation has to focus in on bringing forth the restoration, and that's going to take the church, the true remnant that God's calling to come into alignment with him. And his purpose is speak forth the sounds and begin to take culture. The 7 mountains, in the ways that he's bent us, the way that he's made each one of us to take different areas and use our giftings. The hardest thing I think so many times with people is that if you don't fit my mold or what I'm doing, then okay, you're over here. And God is saying, hey, I need Lindy Ann. I need what Henriette has. I need what Sandra has. I need to get those other pieces and come together and utilize that. Wow, what a power we could be if we work together instead of...
Amen. Boy, that's right.
So
as we wrap this up, Lindy, let me give you 30 seconds to give us your final thoughts.
When I came to America, I didn't even know who my own president was. And I was convicted by the Lord. I started dreaming about President Trump praying in tongues in the Oval Office. I saw the church uniting together and a revival breaking out. And God spoke to me. He said, Lindy Ann, what looked political, what looked like a Satanist takeover will be a revival. And my message to America is hold the line, advance the line, and know that revival actually means to bring that which is dead back to life. So no matter how dead the situation looks, no matter how dead the corruption looks and the election fraud and the COVID and this and that and this tyrannical takeover, and we're seeing people drop dead. I mean, what's happening is insane. It is like a genocide all over again. It is that bad. But the reality is God is able to resurrect the dead. And for me, someone who was super ignorant, didn't know anything, giving me a prophetic dream, I picked up a prophetic mantle, governmental mantle for America, and he just kept telling me, Lindy Ann, you hold on to that. Every single thing. I can't share it now, but every single thing in that dream came to pass. And I want to tell you, revival is coming. Don't give up.
Amen.
Keep praying,
revival
fasting,
is coming,
and worshiping the Lord.
Yes. Henriette,
Amen.
Thank you so much for sharing your story today. Lindy, and your story. Darla, your comments. You all, thank you so much. Harriette, it is just amazing to see how God has healed you. And I do want to encourage everybody, her book, By Any Means Necessary, you can get it on our site, heartstonenetwork.com. Once I started, I couldn't put it down. Of course, I also have such a heart for Africa. I love Africa, been many times. So thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for joining us. And I hope you will check out heartstonenetwork.com, where you can find our past episodes and you can see lots of great content. We will see you guys next time.